Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's do it. Okay. Hi, welcome everyone, and welcome to all Sublation Media listeners and future readers. As Doug says, we're coming to you live from Ljubljana today. It's the kind of service you get on Sublation Media now, and we are actually in the Zizek household, which I think some people of our listeners are going to be excited about. And we're joined by Jela Krecic, who is an author, a writer, former journalist. Jela is teaches at the University of Ljubljana here. Several novels, including None Like Her, which is out in English. And but your first book is out in Slovene. Your first non-fiction book, philosophy book, is out in Slovene, right? What was that called in Slovene time?
The translation would be The Errors of Non-Dupes.
The non-dupes?
Yeah.
Which means, like, what's a non-dupe?
Those who don't want to be deceived.
So, like, characters who don't like being tricked?
Well, it's a theoretical book, so it explores, the Lacanian sentence, le non-dupe err. So those who don't want to be deceived will be deceived.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so we'll get into that. I mean, and it's about popular culture, but especially TV series, right? And sort
and
of the
movies
history.
And comedy.
Kind of like psychoanalytic, but as Ljubljana is famous for, psychoanalytic political perspectives on popular culture,
exactly.
Which is what we're going to sort of be talking about this morning, this afternoon, whatever it is, your morning, my afternoon, So what we'll start with is talking about comedy, I guess. And so what I've done for preparation for this, Jela mentioned to me loads of shows that you want to talk about. What I did, which I thought was pretty interesting yesterday, I watched the first ever Curb Your Enthusiasm, and I watched the first episode of the most recent. There's a recent series from this year, right?
Which one?
Of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
The 11th season.
So I watched the first episode of season 1 and first episode of season 11, and I watched the first episode of Sex and the City, and the first episode of the new series.
It's just like that.
Yeah, just together, so that I could think about, because I think you feel like these shows, they show something about sort of the way comedy has changed, and I guess this also connects to cancel culture and what we saw at the Oscars, which is, and so I mean, you've done a lot of work on popular culture and on comedy as well. So, let's start by talking about that. I know you've been watching The Office recently, so let's talk about comedy in general, and like, how do you think comedy has like changed over the last? Well, when did Curb Your Enthusiasm start, and when did Sex and the City start? Let's say
it started approximately at the same time, like just before 2000,
right?
The year 2000.
I think that seems right. And then so if we take the 20 years, let's say, that from 2000s, the start of things like Curb Your Enthusiasm, Sex and the City, and then we look at comedy today, 2022, 20 years later. What do you think we're looking at?
Well, the first interesting thing is that Sex and the City and Curb Your Enthusiasm, I think they were one of the first shows where there's no canned laughter. So this is the first sign of a comedy that doesn't want to be generic, that wants to get out of the genre of a sitcom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was the beginning of exploring different type of comedies. Although I would say that Curb Your Enthusiasm is a classical comedy.
Yeah.
It strives on the comic procedures. It has comic heroes. It has comic plot lines. And as far as I'm concerned, I mean, this is one of the greatest comedies of our time.
Wow, okay. And it is actually centered on, in a sense, the figure of the non-dupe, as you put it, isn't it? Would that be right? Is Larry David a figure of the non-dupe, or would you not put him
Yeah. Probably he's, although I would say he's more of a complainer, the figure of complaining, like he's constantly unsatisfied with the way culture works, with manners, with people who don't accept manners or are not polite enough. Yeah. And you have all these, it's like watching a list of complaints about culture. It's like civilization and its discontent, but through this comic hero.
I mean, that's a great take on it. But I mean, when I watched the 2 episodes this yesterday, I thought I was surprised when I watched the first one that it seemed quite. Well, it was anti-woke culture in a way, I suppose, because I could, I don't know if you remember these scenes, but like, for example, when he tries to get into the cinema, there's a woman sitting there in the aisle seat, and he says, "Excuse me," and she doesn't want to move, and then she says, "You're looking at my tits" or something, and then he has to sort of go, and then like he so and it seems to be mocking that it's mocking a hypersensitive world, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is also mocking the main character, so Larry David. He's also the target of his own comedy, which I think it's the best thing. I mean, that's what you search for in comedy, like that comedy takes everybody as a possible target of the joke, of the
message. Right. It's not like we're laughing.
Yes, because it's so interesting with him. He usually complains about right things, like people cutting in lines or people who don't park between two lines, and he has all these complaints against people, culture, and so on. But if you think about it, the element that is the most disturbing is him himself with all this complaining. If he would just shut up, if he were able to just be quiet sometimes and not point out the elephant in the room, the world would function much better than constantly
and that's absolutely right. And even in that is a great point about it, because there are so many brilliant scenes where everyone's thought it, but he says it. So he'd be talking to his wife, and he'll sort of be saying, "Oh, I really fancy that woman we went out with the other night," and then you'll all know that he's obviously sort of thinking about the fact that he fancies her, finds her attractive, whatever. But then he'll have to go that one extra step and say, "I did find her attractive." So there's something about that it just sort of goes one step further.
Yeah, and the reason why he's a comic character is because even when he realizes that it is not good for him to go as far as he goes in pursuing all these issues, he can't help himself. There's just something stronger in him, and he just goes, there's this drive of complaining, which is more important than anything. And this is also the reason why he's ostracized sometimes, and why friends hate him a little bit, at least wives of his best friends.
Yeah, and it's also these everyday things that happen to him, like in season 1 at some point when he goes to the 10-pin bowling and somebody else takes his shoes home. But this, I think, is a kind of interesting. I mentioned this example as like perhaps a way to talk about psychoanalysis and stuff before we come to kind of cancel culture. So basically, I think it's in somewhere in season 1, they go to the 10-pin bowling alley, and you put your shoes there. Do you have 10-pin bowling in Slovenia?
Probably, yeah.
You've never been?
I've been once in my life.
Once in your life? Well,
it's fun.
When you visit London, we'll go 10-pin bowling. But you put your shoes in, you get these bowling shoes, and then he goes to pick up the shoes to leave, and somebody else has taken his shoes home, so he's just left his socks. This is a kind of interesting kind of castration moment, but with a kind of everyday life aspect to it. So would you say Curb Your Enthusiasm is something you can use psychoanalysis to understand, or do you feel like it engages with psychoanalytic stuff in some way?
Well, on some level, definitely. I mean, but what I see in psychoanalytic terms is exactly that dissatisfaction with the way society works. And what is comical about it is that the main character who points out all these these crucial issues is the main stain or the main disturbing factor in all of this. And this is why I think he is not, he tries to be the enlightened one, the one that realizes the truth of the situation, but he just doesn't see what his own participation in these disasters is.
That's why I thought of him as a kind of a non-mute character, I think. But let's come to how it's changed, and maybe we can also bring in Sex and the City here. So, what do you think has changed with comedy from the time when, Curb Your Enthusiasm first comes out? As we've said, in some ways quite a radical comedy, quite a kind of comedy as relief, maybe. But you think things have changed in the 20 years since then?
Yes, I think that it has become so important in our culture to constantly pronounce your own awareness about the problems, the current issues, and so on. There were these famous stand-ups from Ricky Gervais or Dave Chappelle, and the latest one, Jimmy Carr.
Yeah.
And it seems to me all these stand-up comedians, which I admire enormously, they are sort of through comedy, through their stand-up, they're trying to apologize for doing comedy, for making jokes, or they are trying to explain to the audience how joking works or what stand-up is for. And it's so, to me, it's totally interesting that, comedy is with us here on this earth for thousands of years, and now in year 2022 you have to have a comedian that sort of apologizes for being a comedian, for making jokes.
You do see it, don't you? And you see comedians even in part of I don't know what you call that, before the punchline where the joke is kind of building tension. You do often see sort of phrases like, I know I shouldn't, but and then the dirty joke comes anyway, which is impure. But so I'm totally with you on that. And do you think you see this shift in something like season 11 of Curb Your Enthusiasm, or if you like, comparing the original Sex and the City to the recent series? Do you think you can see evidence of this shift?
Yeah, in Sex and the City, I see that, because the first series was very light, and it was jokey, and everybody joked about these sexual problems and making fun not only of men who these female heroes interacted with, but also they were joking about themselves. This was a series that was critical of, the society, the men, but also the women. But at the same time, it totally promoted what I call female comradeship. You have these 4 girls, and their friendship is sort of in the center of these chaotic sexual tendencies in modern life. So in this way, I thought the series was emancipatory. Like, it really had this freeing vibe. In a sense, yes, women can go, out, dance, have sex with whomever, and they will not be judged for that. And it was a promotion of a certain kind of friendship in a world that is precarious, in times where relationships are doomed, or
Interesting. I totally agree. And say a bit more, because I think you sort of, don't you, isn't it that sort of what you're saying is that in a way, and maybe we can relate this to psychoanalysis, that you described that earlier comedy as light. This is like Freud's idea of laughter and comedy as relief, right? So exactly. There's kind of, according to Freud, perhaps you can sort of talk through Freud's position more than I, but there's an argument that a key aspect of comedy or laughter, humor, is from his book on that, is this kind of relief, and there's a sort of, in a sense, openness to that thing, that idea, right?
Exactly, yeah. Freud's idea was that comedy, in essence, is what he calls, it saves psychic energy, because in real world we put so much energy in just being polite, civil, not talking dirty, not saying everything that comes to our minds. And comedy is a cultural, civilized form in which, for a second or two, you have this release of this tension that was building up.
So like, society is able to a repressive society is able to sustain itself by these kind of momentary release.
Exactly.
Moments.
And Freud sees enormous potential and great social functions in jokes, in a sense that it enables people to relax a little bit in a society that is very repressive. And it is funny that today the jokes or joking seems to be the source of tension, because every comic is afraid that he's going to be cancelled or ostracized because of even joking about some things. But in Freud's argumentation, you find that, of course, joke addresses exactly the thing that is sort of a bit problematic, that is a bit, I don't know. That
exactly. I mean, that's important, I think, because on the one hand, if you say it's relief, it makes it seem innocent and sort of.
Yeah, but
actually it does, as you say, it does address serious.
Yeah, it deals with serious problems, or it deals with stereotypes and our prejudices. Exactly, because its function is to free us from several tensions. And of course, the meaning or the function of the joke is not to legitimize our prejudices in any way, but just to release the tensions. And you can only do that by addressing the stuff that is repressing you, or that is
exactly. No, I think that's right. So to come back to our sort of take on the history of it, would you say that this something's changed here, that comedy is not functioning in this way?
I think it's required from comedy today to sort of reflect its own potential harmfulness, that it should address its being potentially toxic or potentially abusive. But this changes the point of the joke. I mean, if there is so much tension about joking, the release that it should provide is no longer there. And this is what I sensed in the new series of the sequel of Sex and the City,
which is called what?
Just Like That.
That's it.
Where I got a feeling that the producers were afraid to go back to that light tone of series, and they had to put in a lot of tragic or misfortunate events to make it a bit I don't know, more serious or more aware. I don't think it works. I mean, for me, it doesn't. I
in a way, you've convinced me. Because when I watched it, I thought the opposite. I thought I was expecting this series to be light and crap, trash TV, just a bit of happiness. But I was quite surprised to see it dealing with woke culture, I suppose, but also the idea of these returning sort of 50-something-year-old women, and they're now trying to process this kind of mad woke cancel culture world. And I liked that element of it because I thought, oh, that's interesting. I didn't expect them to have a sort of, because I felt like the contemporary liberal world was being criticized through the eyes of these 50-somethings from the 2000s. But your argument is, in a sense, the reverse, that there's almost a shame that it felt the need to make it this serious, politically engaged topic, because what that shows us is that comedy has lost some of its kind of, free releasedness.
Yes, I think the common perception is that comedy is stupid because it's light and it's fun. But actually, I think it's the reverse. I mean, now that it's Just Like That became more serious, I think it's more stupid. Because if you watch the first seasons of Sex and the City, you see that the joke is also turned on them, but not in this self-searching way, but in a comic structure. And it's quite different if you have a heroine that is constantly afraid she's not woke enough, or she's racist, or if the show makes fun of a certain racist tendencies that are in a lot of people.
And in a way, this history of comedy that you're describing, I think it's embodied by that weird incident at the Oscars that we just mentioned, because it used to be the case that comedy was this kind of collaborative, open relief, but now comedy has become a point of tension, I suppose, is what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, the tension, and it's obviously very dangerous to joke about things. And what I'm afraid of, I admit that there are good jokes and there are bad jokes and there are stupid jokes. So it's not like all jokes should be praised and tolerated even. But the joke you were talking about, the Chris Rock joke.
Yeah, right.
Firstly, I don't see it as
just fine, right?
Yeah, it was okay. It was a fine joke, perhaps, but it was also, I didn't see anything offensive in that joke.
No.
So I didn't understand the reaction.
No, I think you're right, aren't you? Because it wasn't saying that. I mean, the GI. What was the joke? It was something like, reminds me
like Will Smith's wife looks like G.I. Jane.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, G.I. Jane is a heroine. She's like an American superhero.
I wouldn't mind looking like Demi Moore myself. So.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's hardly the most edgy.
Yes, and I think at the moment we start to search for offensiveness in a joke. We will never stop. Every joke is potentially hurtful.
And maybe every sentence,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because language is not a system that is perfect, or the meaning of words is not laid out in totality. So you can always find some offensive sub.
Yeah, exactly. But I think you're onto something there, because something has changed. We now do start to search for when a new comedy series comes out, or perhaps even when it's in development, you can sort of sense that the whole thing is guided by a search for what could be found offensive.
Exactly. Are there enough African Americans? Are there enough women?
Yeah.
What is the representation? Yeah.
So why? Why has this happened? Because I think, I'm the only person here, but your audience of one is completely convinced that your argument is correct. I do think you're right, that something has changed here, and it's great to use the framework of psychoanalysis to explore that. But for thousands of years, as you said, comedy's operated as this kind of release system. Suddenly now, in the last 20 years, since the start of Curb Your Enthusiasm and Sex and the City, you've got a kind of shutting down of it, where comedy itself has become almost the cultural point of tension between people. Cancelled comedians, people getting slapped for their jokes,
people afraid to make jokes in public life.
So why has this happened? What does it show? What this symptom in the shift in comedy, what does it say?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I'm not saying I have the complete or the best answer to that, but I would think in the lines, when Freud wrote this book on jokes, that society was still very repressed in terms of sexuality, manners, and so on. So a lot of repression, and jokes were sort of a way to get rid of all that social tensions. And it's funny that today that we sort of got rid of all this repression, at least in Western liberal societies, it seems that it's almost like the freedoms that we have in opposition to, I don't know, our grandmothers, we find them sort of impossible to tackle. So this would be one answer. But the other answer is, I don't know, maybe hidden in the fact that there are no big political projects that would promise, some idea of emancipation or progress or future. So the lack of politics on the level of, I don't know, getting rid of poverty, addressing the ecological problems, addressing the class antagonisms, and all this stuff, because we don't have politics that will deal with these real systemic problems. We have the tendency to just try to repair world on the level of individuals who are too racist or too insensitive.
Right. I think that's a great point. That something that's going on here is something. And this maybe is a kind of Marxist point. I suppose that what we're doing when we think about cancelling X, Y, or Z person, or when we think about what X, Y, or Z joke was wrong or right, what we're doing is instead of thinking about structural problems, we're focusing in on individuals and thinking about whether there's a wrong or rightness in the individual rather than in the wider social. I think that's a great sort of take on contemporary culture. I think you have answered.
Yes, and I think I love this author Walter Ben Michaels. I don't know if you heard of him.
Tell us about him.
Yeah, I think we can call him a Marxist theoretician, and he has this great argument. He says, if you take diversity or the values of all this discourse of diversity, I mean, you can keep that and still think about the class antagonisms and the functioning of capitalist order. It's not like if we start to deal with these real political problems like ecology, the poverty, the class, the class struggle and so on, that we have to forget about the achievements of feminism or Black Lives Matter or whatever. It's just very important that we keep these topics that concern the universal body, the society alive, and to tackle them, to address them.
No,
not to
right.
Not to be just satisfied with this game when we go complaining about others and canceling them because they are too abusive, insensitive. Of course, it's not nice if people, create or produce hate speech, but this is not the thing that makes today's liberal society. The poverty is the big gap between the richest and all the others.
I think that's totally right. I mean, I'm not sure if I don't want to push you towards a controversial topic, but we are talking about Hollywood and big production stuff. And this makes me think it's also a kind of reading of the Me Too movement. So what you saw initially was the rooting out of big figures, your Harvey Weinsteins and so on, who, clearly needed rooting out. Now, people then realised, obviously, or not realised, but then the movement moved towards what some people call Me Too too, which is structurally there are problems, which of course there are. These are not just evil people like Harvey Weinstein, but there are structural issues with, the whole system of that. But then what you got was almost every kind of micro patriarchy being kind of rooted out and cancelled. So again, this constant insistence on, we found yet another person, let's get rid of them. We found another guilty person, let's get rid of them. We found yet another who only did a small thing, but still, let's throw them out too. And what doesn't change is the sort of structure of the system.
And I think this is the problem, because all this discourse of toxic men and toxic women and toxic relationships, in the end, you come to the fact that we are all, as individuals, on some level toxic, right? And that this constant cleansing of others and ourselves, it can go on forever, because nobody, as Billy Wilder would say, nobody's perfect. So, and I just don't think that cancel culture and woke culture is the answer for these problems. As you said, I mean, the problems of Me Too should be tackled on a systemic level. Firstly, of course, I am for every, sex predator who is put on trial. I mean, I'm all for that, for, also individual guilt and so on. But I'm against this tendency to see toxicity everywhere, because all of us are toxic in some way, or will be, or were at some point of our lives. And this is, I don't want to live in a society where everybody is constantly conscious, self-conscious.
And that goes back to the comedy thing,
Exactly.
There is something healthier about a society which can laugh.
Yes, and I think a comedy is a genre that is an accepting genre. It's like a genre that says, like, let's make fun of all of us, and in that sense, sort of embrace all of us.
Yeah, I mean, I can see your sort of shelves of DVDs at the side. So I can see your box set of Madmen, which I wanted to talk about. But also, while we're on this topic of sort of Marxist readings of comedy, I think we should briefly talk about The Office, because I know that you've been binging The Office.
Yes, I haven't digested that thoroughly.
You're watching it right now. Right? So how much have you watched, and how often are you watching it? Every night? Every night. And how far?
I became addicted with
But you were talking about the Steve Carell American Office, right?
Yeah. I love The Office. I think it's modern comedy in a sense that it uses new kind of procedures than, let's say, classical comedy.
Okay.
Because it's...
Whereas you said Curb Your Enthusiasm was a classical comedy,
I think it was
different.
Curb Your Enthusiasm lost the sitcom form, but the structure of the comedy is still very much like, classical sitcom, TV sitcom. While The Office The Office starts as a cringe genre where you're just like appalled by the main character, who is played by Steve Carell, whom I love. But then I think that the American version progresses in very interesting way in developing comedy. And I like these subliminal messages in it. Like the first message is, you can so identify with this office as it is shown there. It's like every office in the world is sort of, you can recognize every office.
There's a certain,
and then there's the element of the power structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the great message of the show is it hints at that. Of course, Michael, main character, he's an awful boss. He's a true idiot. But the message of the series is, even when a non-idiot occupies this power position, he is hated in the same way. He makes wrong decisions also,
Yes.
So in this way, it is a true comedy because it's not moralistic. It doesn't...
I think, so your point is that you're not laughing because the boss is supposed to be a figure of intelligence and they're actually an idiot. You're laughing because it doesn't matter if they're an idiot or a genius.
Yeah, I think
the
that's a great dialectics.
Yeah. So it kind of connects to what we were talking about before. And okay, so the English one, I know you have yet to watch it. You're in for a massive...
I just saw the first episode.
Oh, did you? Yesterday you watched the first episode of the Ricky Gervais one. Okay, that's really interesting. So, what do you think are the main differences then between, let's say...
Well,
what was your first
always,
impression?
I don't know how the British version develops because, in the American one, you have the love story, which is very compelling. And I think the main difference is, which is the difference between American and British television in general, that British will never go along. They will never go with happy endings or just this shiny, happy vibe that you can always trace in American television. The good always wins. The couple that's meant to be together is going to be together. The British television is always more on the dark side.
But
it's not less funny, I would say.
No.
It's just a different kind of comedy. It's more on the... It's more real. It's more realistic.
Mm-hmm. But do you think they share this, as you put it, almost Marxist quality, where what's I think the way what you're saying is that, in a way, the other, because didn't you say something to me about the other kinds of not bosses, but managerial figures, when they come into the show, they're even worse. So you get these characters, which is Ricky Gervais, Steve Carell, who's the boss of this small office, and they embody characteristics of a boss. But then there are these other... I think that's really important, that they're not actually at the top of this hierarchy at all, are they? There are loads of other managerial type and boss figures that come into the show.
Yeah, that's true. And one of the characters, one of the main characters, Jim Halpert, at a certain point, he becomes a manager.
Uh-huh.
And you can see that although he was...
Is he the dark-haired?
He's John Krasinski, the actor.
Yeah, okay.
No, he's actually light hair.
He's the one the nerd guy from the start.
No. He makes fun of the nerd guy.
Yeah, right. Okay. Who says in episode 1?
He's the one that has a love story.
Yeah. And in episode 1, he's like, I don't want to get promoted because if I get promoted, I'm going to have to see this as my career, and that will be the most devastating thing to my identity. Yeah.
But then slowly, because he's in love and he wants to make money and buy a house, I don't know what, he agrees to, expand his career or whatever, try to succeed. And when he becomes boss, you can see that there's a structural problem. He was the one that made fun of the previous boss, or Michael. Mm-hmm. He's the one who was sort of part of this, the workers' club. And now he's on the other side, although he remains the same guy. He's not like a bad boss, or he's not even aggressive, or he's not evil. He doesn't torment nobody. So you can see that there's a power structure there, which is problematic in itself. And it doesn't really matter which idiot comes to occupy the power position in order to be problematic. And
I mean, I think that's totally right. And in a sense, the semi-Marxist or anti-managerial class point of The Office is that the best you can hope for is an idiot boss.
Exactly.
That is so the joke is not on him, but on the system, society, system, which.
And of course, I mean, the funny stuff about The Office is that all the others, the employees, none of them is perfect. They are all problematic people, and this is also nice. It's not like good people against the bad boss. It's like idiot boss against very mediocre types who can be potentially enormously funny and comic. Which is, I think, this is the point of comedy, you deal with very average, common people, but if you make a comedy out of them, it's like a promise to everybody in the audience, your life could be better than it is. It could be comical, even though you are an average, mediocre person.
I think there's something uplifting there, and I agree with that.
Exactly.
Even the English one, which, as you say, can be perceived as this kind of much less uplifting, dark humour. There's nothing sadder in a way than those people's lives in whatever they are. I can't remember the name of the place in England they are. It's like sort of Staines or something. But near where I work. But actually, there's a sense in which one can find lightness in everyday life. Those things,
lightness, and also, I don't know, I think it's encouraging for every person to get a feeling that there is more to life than just yourself, your problems, your stupidity, your idiocy. So it's fine to get through popular culture this way out of your own.
And I think that there'll be I could imagine, for example, I work in a university, so do you. I could imagine like academics who feel privileged to work at university looking at that kind of office and saying, that'd be awful. We said when we were talking about I'd kill myself working in there, but actually in a way it's not. The humour is not about us like them who have menial office jobs, because the structure of academic life is just as stupid and funny. Exactly. I have colleagues just like these people.
Academic bureaucracy is exactly like
exactly.
That.
And I think that's it. I know we're sort of running out of time. I feel like we've gone for ages. I feel like we've mainly and only really talked about comedy, and we should keep kind of focused on that. I do want to briefly talk about Madmen, which we said we'd do, which I don't think you can think of as a comedy, but it occurs to me it's relevant here because this is also, it has comic elements, of course, very strong ones, but it is also like a great, maybe even the best example of a show which is about structure rather than individuals. Because this is I totally disagree. It actually happens, doesn't it? In the sort of 5 or 6 series of Mad Men that there are, the buildings change, but they are structured the same. The names of the people on the door, the people who are having affairs with who, and so on. But in a sense, really, what Mad Men kind of charts is the history of a structure, and their choice is advertising. We just said it could apply to academia; it can apply to office jobs. So there's maybe some follow-on.
I can see that. And what I find so many things interesting in Mad Men. The first one is, why did the time travel to the 60s? Mm-hmm. This is a great question that the series as itself, as it poses, because I think the show is a reflection on our contemporary times.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Yeah. If you look at the way they are drinking alcohol during the day and all this excessive enjoyment, I think it's a commentary on the way that our enjoyment changed in the last 50 years.
So, right, okay, brilliant. So this kind of goes back to where we started with thinking about how we can understand through popular culture what shifts have taken place in contemporary culture. Exactly. So you think, so we look back to a different form of capitalism, an earlier form where enjoyment was kind of rife, and
I think it's a fantasy of an enjoyment in the 60s. I don't think that people ever smoked as much or drank as much.
The amount they drink is brilliant.
But I think that's Matthew Weiner's point. Is I think he exaggerates on purpose. in order to shed light on today's enjoyment. And I was thinking, this show was very popular, and I loved it. I watched it like 5 times, all through. And maybe one of the points is that today we can no longer enjoy like that. You will never see a pregnant woman smoking, God forbid, drinking. And it's like through the series, you can get some of that enjoyment by watching the series. So it's like enjoying by proxy, by television.
In a way, the series of series, the whole of Madmen, it actually kind of documents that decline, because I would say the first 3 series are series. Is that what you say? Series.
Yeah.
Are sort of flowing. Yeah, the first 3 seasons are sort of flowing with enjoyment. It almost feels like there's excess enjoyment, and the latter part of the series feels like there's almost the kind of peak.
That's a great observation. Yeah, I didn't think about it, but one of the things that I found so symptomatic in a great way. I mean, this is why I find this series it's my favorite. Did you see the ending of the Madmen? The last scene?
I'm similar to you in that I watched the whole thing through once, and then 4 or 5 times I've started again, but I've never made it to the end twice. So I've only seen the ending once. I remember him being by a road, and it's sort of like
he becomes he gets into New Age, sort of trying to save himself from alcoholism.
He's been in a retreat, hasn't he?
Failed relationships, which is one of the themes of the series. Like, is love possible in this American capitalism? And he's failed in all fronts. And now he found some sort of peace that they're in California in that retreat. But it ends with the commercial for Coca-Cola, which was the real commercial, Hilltop, in 1970.
Which was the real commercial.
Real commercial. And
interesting, isn't it?
It's sort of like there on that hilltop, he came out with the
And in a way, it's framed by the soft drinks you offer, because there's the Pepsi commercial, isn't there? Be My Baby that was Peggy's first project or something in the first series. So these sort of American soft drinks and commercialism.
I find the content of this series, I think it's crystallized here at the end, because if you look at that commercial of Coca-Cola, you see I don't know if you remember it, but the commercial it has this lovely song, and you have young people of all varieties, diverse.
Welcome to diversity.
Welcome to diversity from all over the world. Black,
but a corporate
Asian,
diversity.
And and the message of the commercial is we all drink Coca-Cola. And I was thinking, it's like the series points to the point in time where capitalism became Jameson's late capitalism. In a sense that...
I mean, tell us about that argument. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, the 60s in America, it's like you go through this period that has feminist movements and black movement and all kinds of civil rights movements, and it's really exciting and so on. What it leads to is the capitalism that is now able to adopt all these strivings, all lifestyle, all diversity, but on the condition that the capitalistic frame remains the same. So you get this order, the same capitalist order, which is more liberal, which is more permissive, which it doesn't bet on classical traditional values, family values. You can be black, you can be Asian, as long as you drink Coca-Cola. As long as you accept the economic order we are living in, you can be whatever you want. And I think that the series grasped this transition from classical capitalism to late capitalism, as then Frederick Jameson describes it.
And that has a resonance now with things like Nike and major sports events being the pioneer of Black Lives Matter, and right now the crisis in Ukraine. The fact that basically you're in a situation where you can be as diverse as you want, but capitalism is what unifies you.
And it's the same with ecology. There are all these corporations that are totally ecologically aware, or what's the term, I don't know. But you can feel that the capitalism as such, the mode of production, the mode of consumerism, is the real problem or the real source of all the climate troubles we're in. So, they are appropriating the ecology, the climate discourse in order just to remain there.
I mean, it's absolutely. I mean, there's a great book I'll send to you, which is partly by, I think it's by a group in the UK called the Salvage Collective. But it's basically this, it's so interesting that corporations have taken on sustainability language, but they're the same corporations that kind of, And
I was so amazed. I don't know if you heard about this, but all these big Silicon Valley companies, they're only too happy to get as many toilets as people want for all genders or whatever. It is never a problem. But try to form a union in the corporation, and you have a total war.
Exactly, and I think that in a way that has threaded through all of the things we've talked about. I mean, in a sense, we've been talking about a shift that's happened over the last, let's say, 20 years. We can see it through comedy. We can also see it in other facets of life in capitalism. This Jameson way of thinking about it is really useful. But basically, what we're seeing there is a load of focus on individuals and on identity, from toilets to cancelled comedians, about jokes, personal guilt, instead of the kind of structural shift and change that we need and is kind of lacking in contemporary.
Very well put.
Well, you said it. I just summarised. Anyway, I think we could go on for ages, and I think we should have it on again. That would be great, because we didn't talk. We only really talked about comedy, which was sort of one of 4 or 5 things we were going to talk about. So let's do it again. And thanks so much for doing it. It's been extremely interesting.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been so nice to be here. And thanks for watching, listening. Let us know in the comments and so on if you like this kind of salon form, because this in-person form, we haven't obviously been able to do. But it's actually, for me, this is my favourite. It's so nice to sort of be having a chat in person. If people like it, let us know. And thanks so much for listening to this Sublation Media podcast, and see you soon.